I am the Chief People Officer at Practus. Before we start, just a few quick instructions. Request all of you to please keep yourselves on mute. There's a restriction in the gallery view of Teams. So, apart from the speakers, request you to turn your video off for now. Later in the Q&A session, you may turn it on if it's required. This is our first webinar that is focused towards young finance professionals who aspire to be CFOs. We hope that all of you who joined this webinar today find this session truly insightful and participate in the webinars that we plan in the future as well. A very big thank you to our panelists, S. Venkat and Rahul Bothra, for taking time out today. Really pleased to have you all on board. A quick intro on Practus. So Practus Advisors, known as My CFO earlier, has worked with over 700 organizations to deliver measurable ROIs through our Office of CFO, performance improvement, and business transformation services. Currently, our team is about 200 strong, so 200 industry experienced finance professionals who are based out of our offices in India, New York, as well as Dubai. I'll take a couple of minutes to introduce our host for the webinar. So we have with us S. Venkatraman, or Venkat as he's popularly known to all of us, who co-founded Practus Advisors about 10 years back. Venkat is a chartered accountant, a cost and management accountant, and a risk manager. He started his career with PwC, where he worked for close to 8 years. What's really interesting about having Venkat as part of this panel today is that he himself is a very young CFO. So he was only 28 years of age when he was appointed as CFO of Aon's India subsidiary. Aon, as you might be aware, is the world's largest reinsurance broker. Like a lot of us at Practus will vouch for it. Venkat actively mentors a lot of young professionals, both within Practus as well as outside, providing a lot of career planning tips as well as guidance to all of us. I'm sure that we'll benefit from Venkat's perspectives today. So with this, I'll hand this over to Venkat. Grateful if you could please introduce Rahul and we can commence today's session.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elvi, and a very warm welcome, firstly, to Rahul Bothra. Very privileged to have you here on our first ever webinar that's focused on young professionals, and also a very warm welcome to all the participants today evening. I think it suffices to say probably in Rahul's introduction that he is CFO of one of India's only 4 decacorns. There are only 4 companies in India that have got a valuation of more than $10 billion. There are only approximately about 50 odd decacorns in the world today. 4 are from India, and one of them is Swiggy. I'm not going to embarrass Rahul by sharing his, maybe you want to just move to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. Rahul by sharing his age, but I would say my guesstimate is probably like early to mid 40s, but clearly he kind of looks even younger than that, Rahul. So congratulations. Rahul is a chartered accountant. He's got an absolute blue chip career path. He's worked with top brands like Wipro, Colgate, Britannia, Olam, so both Indian as well as multinational companies. Within 8 to 9 years of his qualification, he was already CFO at one of the SBUs at Britannia. He was appointed in 2017 as Swiggy's first ever CFO. And, just correct me if I'm wrong, Rahul, I think at that time, probably the valuation was below $1 billion. I think in a matter of last 4 years, it's now kind of grown more than 10, 11 times. Swiggy, as all of you will know, I think all of us are kind of probably users of Swiggy. They've done a bunch of very interesting things, including Genie, Instamart. The last I heard is they were also trying to pilot drone trials. I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot about this as we go along from Rahul. And the one thing that I would want to personally acknowledge and give a lot of thanks for to Team Swiggy is their Hope Not Hunger project, where they distributed more than 5 lakh free meals during COVID times. When we're looking for a young role model CFO to kick off this series, we were thinking about, who best to invite, and I don't think we could have got a better speaker than you, Rahul. What I would like to do is to possibly request you, rather than me giving a formal introduction of you, Rahul, probably for you to kind of share your story in your own words before we kind of kick off with the questions from my side, Rahul. Over to you. Thank you once again for joining in.
Hey, thank you so much, Venkat. And that was very generous of you to give me the introduction. I think hearing Aditi, I feel that we should be doing a role reversal. You are probably, yourself a very, young, distinguished CFO yourself. So maybe we should be doing a role reversal. But let me do my part. So yeah, I started off my career, back in the days with Wipro, as an industrial trainee actually. So within my third year of horticulture, and very post my qualification, I moved over to Britannia. I had a stint of close to 8 years there. Did various roles in Britannia, starting off with internal audit, and moved on to more commercial functions. It became SBU, as you said, a CFO of a SBU which was acquired, and in my last role was heading the finance for the dairy function. At that time, I got an international opportunity. Since as we know, Britannia is a homegrown company, I felt that that's probably one area where I could do well, to not only get the hard learnings of working in an international setup, but also the soft learnings that comes along with dealing with cross-cultural setups and multinational companies. So I took the courage to go around, and I joined Olam in Brazil. It was pretty, I would say, and I can share some of the experiences there. It was definitely very challenging in the early days, but as I settled down in my role, it became a lot easier. Post my stint in Brazil, I moved over to the headquarters at Singapore. Again, a 4 year stint there was almost settling down in my escalator lifestyle, as my boss used to call it. And at that time, I said it was getting to those mid-stage career crisis where you're just making last things larger, and maybe the and something that Olam taught me was the entrepreneurial culture there, right? So I did a lot of fun stuff at Olam in Brazil, including a greenfield coffee plantation to a cotton farm, where a lot of activities was led by the finance streams. So that kind of gave me the an insight into what does entrepreneurship really looks like. So when I was in that mid career crisis, I said, okay, should I start up on my own or join probably a late stage a startup which has probably moved beyond the product market fit, but still hasn't scaled, and therefore can I be a part of the journey? I was lucky to have met Harsha, the founder at Swiggy. Really liked what he was building at the intersection of technology and logistics, with food delivery being use case number one. I thought it was a very powerful consumer problem that was being solved at scale. And I took the step. I said, let's do it. If any, I will be a lot more wiser, having taken that step. It's been 4.5 years, seems like 45. It's been a lot of ups and downs, but generally been a very, very fun ride through these experiences. So that's really my story. Been around a few 3 or 4 I would say organizations, but really still learning. I would say still day zero, a lot of learning still ahead of me. So I'm kind of not taking any distinguished status yet.
Well, that's phenomenal and also very inspiring, Rahul. Thank you for sharing that. So, friends, today's session we would like to keep it as interactive as possible. I have 3 or 4 questions for Rahul, but I would very much encourage you to ask questions, possibly type it into the chat box, and I'm happy to present them to Rahul. We just want to make sure that this session is truly useful to you from a very practical standpoint in terms of getting some very implementable takeaways, right? That we can learn from Rahul's experience that you could possibly implement in your own careers while chasing your dream and your ambition to become CFO at a young age, right? So please feel free to keep this very interactive. So Rahul, I'll probably move to the first question, right? When, now with the benefit of hindsight, when you kind of look back the last 20-25 years, when you compare your career path with those of your peers, what do you think would be the top 2 or 3 steps that you believe you took that help you to kind of move on to a very fast track kind of a trajectory, Rahul?
Sure, Venkat. So I think everybody's journey is unique, right? So a lot of my peers are doing exceedingly well. I know a lot of them. I know some of them are entrepreneurs in themselves. A lot of them are partners in Big Four. So I think every journey is unique. Obviously, life creates a lot of opportunities for all of us. Our ability to make these options available to us and then take the choices that we do really define the path that we take. So I mentioned about a few choices that I made in my life, whether it is about changing sectors, whether it is about the international experience, or taking the hard step of going back, coming back to India and joining a startup. So some of these I think were obviously my journey. If I kind of look at what has helped me, and I kind of, when I reflect back that okay, this has been my journey of these many years, what did I do, and what are those maybe two or three traits that helped me during this journey? I think the single biggest factor would be really about taking risks, right? And as I mentioned to you, there were a few examples in my life. I joined Wipro, as industrial trainee and post qualification. It was obviously the sector of the century, right? IT was just taking off at that time. But I decided to go back to a more traditional setup in FMCG, and I joined Britannia at that time. Now it was again maybe a not so popular move, but something that I was very clear that why I was making that. And what I really wanted to learn is the nuts and bolts of how do you build a hard business from grounds up. And over the years, that experience really helped. I started off in internal audit, right from learning about how cookies are manufactured, working late night shifts in a factory setup during those internal audits, to doing a hard sales man's job, doing those 40 beats in a remote town, in Kerala or in the Northeast. And I've done a lot of that experiential learning that came along, really shaped me as what I would call a business, finance person, or somebody who's very close to the business, right? So already we obviously have all the traditional accounting skills by our education and our past background and the learnings that we go through in the curriculum. But I think what really gets missed out is the on the ground business understanding training that we would need to really get through the experience that we need to get. So I think those were some of the risks that I took that really paid off. Obviously, I had a very successful journey at Britannia. The only reason, as I said, I moved out was to explore internationally. Again, a very very hard decision, but a risky one. I landed up in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, and being a vegetarian, the first challenge I faced was not about at workplace, but how do I get around eating veg food because nobody understands English there. I can't communicate, and everything that is being served is obviously has elements of either meat or meat stock, etc. So the challenges of getting into a foreign land, alien country, not able to even order your meal without the challenges that came along, and I thought those were kind of experiential stuff that really taught me how to stay hungry, or I would say stay hungry for success, right, and continue, and then I had to learn the language, and I was there for 5 years, and probably they were the best 5 years of my life, enjoying the country, not only working. And as I said, I actually started a greenfield coffee plantation, a cotton farm, in upcountry locations, living in hard conditions, but then that was really enjoyable. So I think the ability to take risk, and whether it was moving from Singapore back to India, joining a startup, again, it was a different trajectory, but something that I really wanted to look forward to. As I said, I wanted to take that. I knew that the decade ahead belongs to India. When I looked at opportunities that will be coming along, meant that coming back to India and working in a startup, in a consumer tech startup, could mean just increasing my chances of success. See, what you can possibly do is create those chances, but also what you want to do is increase your probability of success, and not really take some wild guesses or wild steps. So that's probably one of the key traits of some of my journey. The second one really is around really having a plan or working on a plan, right? And why would you do what you do? I firmly believe that if you don't know where you're going, maybe you'll never get there. So very right from my early journey, I knew that I wanted to be in the top chair, a corporate CFO role. So while a business unit CFO or a divisional CFO or a country CFO, or maybe a regional CFO are obviously roles that get you to the experiences that you need. But then being in the corporate CFO's chair really opens up a lot of new experiences, and that's something that I work towards, to build those experiences, have that plan that I would want to learn everything before I really get to that chair, right? At the same time, you can't learn enough, right? I mean, I remember before joining Swiggy, I hadn't interacted with a single investor in my life, right? Because as many of you who are working, in different setups would know that typically these interactions or relationships are handled at the corporate level. So again, I took this chance. I think, okay, Swiggy is a startup. I'm sure it would need, capital, and would need investor interactions and all that, that comes along with joining a startup. And I took that plunge. So I think it's kind of worked out. Just taking those chances and risk in life has helped me to probably get, better and better at what I do. You asked the third thing, probably, and I will add maybe three things there, not just the third thing, right? It's all about execute, right? And strategy, idea, all of this is great. Ultimately, you need to get down to the trenches. You need to do it the hard way, and that's where you not only learn, because as you go up the ladder. I mean, typically, if you think of getting to the corporate ladder or ascending the corporate ladder, unless you have experienced and done a lot of that yourself, when you finally get there, and if you don't know how you have got there, it's probably going to be very difficult to be able to do that diverse set of role and the experience, or what's expected out of you, for you to be able to perform in those expectations. So I think you will have to go through that hard journey and execute really well. There will be challenges, but then keep at it, keep growing, keep learning, and have fun along the way. You will definitely be able to meet your plan that you've set out for yourself.
Got it. Well, this is extremely helpful. Thank you so much, Rahul. For me, the key takeaways here is that firstly, you need to have that ambition and the goal, yeah, that you want to kind of become the corporate CFO, as you called it. So, I mean, without having that plan, you're really saying that, look, there is no starting point. You got to set that goal and then start to work towards it right from day one. The second aspect, and I have I've got a bit of a added question on this one, seems to be about going into the business side of things and not just sticking to finance and accounts. Because you mentioned about manufacturing operations, mentioned about Northeast, Brazil, Kerala, etc., where it looks like you really kind of got your hands dirty with the business operations side of things. And getting out of your comfort zone of merely kind of doing controllership or fundraising. So that seemed to be a second part. And the third part is the relentless focus on execution. So not just be the ideas guy, but also implement it on the ground, right? So those seem to be the three key messages. Yeah, so just to go to that second message, right? If you look at really good quality CFOs, I mean, F in the CFO probably is actually a bit of a misnomer, because they're not just the chief financial officer, they're also the chief conscience keeper, they are the chief business partner, they are the chief commercial officer. So can you tell us a little bit, can you give us some practical examples of what are the areas which are non-finance, I mean, in a traditional sense, that you chose to kind of get your hands dirty in your growing up years, if you like, Rahul?
Sure. So I think, Venkat, you rightly said, right? I mean, CFO in today's day and age actually is a CEO, a chief everything officer, right? Because you just cannot ignore any parts of the organization, right? So there are specific roles that probably specific CXOs play, but with this chair, I don't think there's any part of the organization that you can take your eyes off, or not have a basic understanding and an awareness about those functions, right? So it's probably the chief everything officer, and towards that, as I said, you need to build those skills early on. I think taking those hard calls of getting those experiences, putting up your hand whenever you get an opportunity of not only continuing to do your functional role, but anytime there is a cross-functional role that comes up, or a cross-functional probably a project that comes up, you put up your hand and say, I'm ready to kind of take that experience, right? So I remember, while I mentioned about Britannia being a homegrown company and most operations were in India, I was part of the first international acquisition that Britannia did, right? So part of the diligence team, because I was part of that finance team who was looking closely at the brand side of things, and I raised my hand, said that this is something that I would like to learn, and I would like to contribute in this project. So getting access to my first acquisition or an M&A project through there, and obviously I've done many more since then. But that first experience really sets you up nicely. That how do you therefore go about evaluating that business, because you've already seen the business close up, right? So whether what are the drivers of growth, what are the key input output relationships, right? What are the cost effect? What changes? What we call for probably there's a L0 metric that you kind of operate at, but then what is the L3 input metric that changes the L0 metric, right?
Right.
So the cost effect relationship understanding of all these business drivers is a very very key element for you to be able to make part of the whole of those parts, and then be able to make a comprehensive judgment of the situation on hand, whether it is an acquisition, whether it's a new business initiative, whether it's organic growth, whether it is investment in marketing. So I think just getting to understand the L3 level details of what changes and what is the cause effect relationship between them only comes through your understanding of those business and those key business drivers.
Got it. I'm kind of reminded, several conversations with top-notch CFO. I mean, just today we were discussing with Hyacinth Ferrao, who is a controller at Star TV, and we're asking him what's on his agenda right now, and his agenda is on how do you implement machine learning and NGL in customer experiences on how they pick shows on Hotstar. Right. So, I mean, I can't even imagine how this is even linked to finance, right? But the way he's looking at it is to say that, look, if I get a better predictability around customer behavior, then it helps me in revenue optimization, right? So on the face of it, there may not be any link at all, right? Or maybe someone like Sambasivan, the CFO at Tata Sky, a man I admire greatly for his ability to constantly reinvent himself. A conversation that he was having with me was how during COVID times, the big challenge that Tata Sky had was how do you deploy operators, technicians to go and rectify cable problems. Everybody was locked up at home, so everyone needs entertainment, but the technicians are human beings as well, so they are also exposed to COVID. So how do you find mechanisms by which they can actually go to homes and rectify any cable faults, that maybe the satellite faults that could be there, connectivity faults that could be there, right? So a completely operations logistics type of an issue, which has obviously got some heavy HR angles to it, given that it also concerns team member safety. Or someone like a Kailash Gupta at Inox Cinemas, right, who was studying air conditioning technology, because electricity cost is like a big cost, right, in all the cinema theaters. And with this COVID on and off, you're not sure it's 50%, 25% what's going to be allowed. So how do you kind of have spot air conditioning solutions that can cool only certain areas of the real estate, right? I mean, who would think that air conditioning technology would be something that a CFO would need to look at, right? But all, I think, just relating to your point, Rahul, right, that kind of going beyond what is traditionally considered to be finance, not being afraid of getting your hands dirty in the operations, but somewhere doing that improves your perspective of what to do in the finance function itself, right? And of course, not to forget that the credibility that you then carry as a CFO, as a true business partner, is huge, right? Because then you'll be able to talk the language of the business. Yeah. So if I could now move on to a second question, Rahul, which is really around the skills, right? So again, when you kind of look back at your career, what would you think were probably the two top hard skills or functional skills, and probably two top soft skills that you believe were critical ingredients to your successfully making it to CFO at a young age?
Sure, Venkat. So when I kind of look at hard skills, right, and I'm kind of not going to bore everybody with saying that you need your technical skills. I said that's a given, right? The starting point of, I think, most folks who are on this call either have a financial degree or an MBA, and are willing to go down that path of being a CFO. So the hard skills around your technical knowledge, etc., is a given. I think one of the things that I've realized, and that's very very important, right, and it used to be probably a soft skill but no longer is one, is really around communication, right? And you need to be an excellent communicator, so much so that if you are not one, you need to learn it, right? And you need to probably go to a school, you need to have, and it's not just your verbal communication, it's also your visual communication. Today's day and age, for example, as you mentioned, is the digital age, right? We are no longer writing long reports and verbose reports. but really about the visual representation of your data. Right, the kind of big data that is available, how do you make sense out of that? That's probably best represented in visual formats versus trying to write a story or even in Excel sheets or in a table format. So I think the importance of communication can't be undermined. When I say communication, it is not only about your business communication, but also top down and bottom up. When I say top down, right, it's your whether how are you communicating with your teams on a regular basis? What are those agendas that you're setting, right, and what are the learning calendars you're setting for your teams? It has to, unless you kind of keep that as a top of your agenda, it will not happen. Similarly, communication to the various stakeholders, right? So whether it is your board members, whether it is the government officials, whether it is the other peer CXOs, and also communication within the community, right? So within your peer groups outside your company. So I think it's a very, very important skill set that we need to therefore build on. Within somewhere around communication is also networking, right? So you need to build a network, because unless you have a network, it's very difficult then to get access to difficult problems, and it's not something that you can overnight start building, right? So you need to build this over time, right? Make those connections, make those peer networks, be part of groups where you can cross learn, and therefore get solutions in a ziffy without having to go through the learning curve yourself. So I think that's probably one very, very important hard skill that we all need to learn. The second one, which again is a hard skill, is the stuff that I talked about, which is the non-financial skills. Right now, your ability to predict business outcomes, your ability to look at your business plans. Now, how do you kind of just not only look at the financial data, but the non-financial data of it, right? So for example, in our business, right, while we can talk about gross merchandise values and unit economy, etc., the biggest probably determination of our business plan is really the customer experience score, right? NPS, for example. Now, if as a CFO, if you don't understand that, what does NPS stand for, the net promoter score, what are your customers experience your product, what are the pitfalls, how do you avoid them? There is no way that the business model is going to become successful. So therefore, you may have to start learning, and nobody taught us that customer experience is a very important metric when we were doing our curriculum or learning. But then in the real life, there is obviously competition out there. If you're not going to outcompete competition on customer experience, which again has to be measured at every step of the way in the entire customer journey, so you'll have to understand those levers and be able to therefore make those plans and the business plans and the investments so as to make it really sustainable. So those are probably two of the hard skills that I would advocate. On the softer side, I think probably the first one I would call is really your ability to adapt to the environment, right? So as Charles Darwin himself said, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, but the only one that survive is the one which can adapt. During our times, probably Venkat, when we were growing up, the whole IT skills, your ability to implement ERPs, to make interfaces between two systems was probably one skill that helped us in our careers. But today, those are probably not the relevant skills anymore. Today, you have to look at digital skills like big data. You're talking of data sciences. You're talking of your ability to predict through using advanced machine learning systems. And these are not again in the realms of only the technology teams. Today, they are part of the finance core teams. So today, even in our current jobs, we actually have finance engineering as an important part which works along with the finance streams. So I think your ability to adapt is going to be important. Now today, for example, digital skills are important. 10 years down the road, where many of our listeners on this call, they may require a certain different skill, because digital skills again may become a commoditized skill, right? So I think our ability to therefore look at the environment, what's really coming up, and ability to adapt is going to be therefore that differentiator. And unless you are able to unlearn and relearn some of these skills, you may not be relevant anymore. And we have seen these examples play out. Right. The second soft skill probably that I would call out is really around your people management skills, right, and your leadership skills. I think as you go up your careers, while individual contribution probably gets you those immediate success or being known in the organization, I think very quickly you need to change gears, right? Because you cannot as they say, you can't run a symphony with an orchestra requires, for a symphony to play, you need an orchestra, right? An individual player cannot really run the orchestra. So I think your ability to manage teams, look at people's motivations, and be able to lead them, specifically in tough times, right? And these experiential learning that you go through will help you in managing those situations, right? Because there will be crisis situations, there will be tough situations where the team will come up and look up to you. But then your ability to create, leaders out of them, your ability to not just be giving them solutions, but really lead the way and be real, provide mentorship so that you build leaders beneath you. So that's again a very, very important skill as you go about building your careers.
Got it. So one question here, Rahul, is can you give us an example, right? And I think I just wanted to probably expand a little bit on the theme of adaptability, right? So can you give us a couple of examples from your career, right? Just so that our readers are able to relate to the how, right? I mean, the fact that we need to adapt, I think people understand, right? But if you can give us a couple of examples of how you actually did it on the ground, that may be very helpful.
Yeah. So I think, see, when I started off with Swiggy, the first probably thing that we do is deliver on our own, right? So we actually register as a delivery partner, go through the training cycle, and do live orders, right? And when for us to be able to think of going and doing that may look very different, but then that's the experiential learning that you would like to do, right? So really, it's about going to the trenches. It's our ability to therefore look at what is the delivery partner's experience, because when you're going to take decisions sitting in these sitting in your rooms and boardrooms, etc., you will need to be empathetic about the situations, and you need to know what do they go through on a daily basis, right? Similarly, in my past experience, right, for example, farming was one area. As I was talking to get into a cotton farm, and we did a greenfield operation, I had no absolute clue, right, what happens in a farming operation, right? Then you actually need to spend time with a lot of agronomists, understand the input output relationships, what changes, what are the risk factors there. So I think you have to immerse yourself in the point that you made around understanding some of the air conditioning technology as a CFO, because that's your key business driver. Similarly, in a farming operation, what is the relationship of a nitrogen in the soil to rainfall, to irrigation or non-irrigation, to mechanization, to to manual labor, etc. So there are a lot of factors that you will need to therefore learn, and you will not become an industry expert, but you need to get to the right amount of expertise for you to be able to make those business decisions and financial allocations.
Got it. So Rahul, how much of this is individual driven? Because if we kind of go back to the qualifications that some of us may have, do the courses, whether it is 20 years back or today, do they really equip a young finance professional to acquire these skills, or are these largely learnt on the job? And if it is the latter, if it is largely learnt on the job, then who facilitates this? I mean, is this something that you will have to go out and proactively look for and acquire? Or is it fair to kind of say that, look, the HR or the boss in your company should be taking the lead on this?
Sure. I think on the textbook learning was on the job learning. I think there are enough and more researchers that say that probably 10% learning happens in the classroom or in theory, and 90% out there happens while on the job, while you're experiencing what's called experiential learning. So I think I kind of subscribe to that, right? So obviously you need the base and the foundation through the theoretical knowledge and some of the certification processes that you go through. But how do you kind of make them practically applicable to the situations that you are going to work is going to be very, very important. I think what you therefore need is an enabling environment, right? And obviously the personal zeal to, as I said, if you have a plan, you need to keep kind of doing I would say a pre-mortem and also a look back, right? Every maybe couple of years. When I say pre-mortem, okay, if this is my long-term plan and a goal, what am I going to do in the next 2 years? So that's like what I call the pre-mortem exercise. And then at the end of every 2 years or 3 years, you kind of do a look back analysis of what have you achieved, and are you still on path of the trajectory that you had set out for. I think there could be changes that we may have to make in our career midway. There could be new ambitions that may come up. Our motivations may change, but then, as I said, you need to keep recalibrating your new goals if there are any, right? So if you're focused, if you think this is the thing that you want to go after, then you'll continue to make that progress and keep looking back at it. So I think that's really, really important.
Got it. No, actually, that seems to be the question from one of our participants, Srinath Kamath, as well, where he's asking how much is upskilling in technical areas a critical factor in expediting the journey to CFO, especially in today's dynamic environment.
Right.
Any comments on that? Because what is expected of the CFO also seems to be constantly morphing. So
Yeah.
it looks like there will never be a point where you can say, "Hey, look, I have now become CFO. I'm all set for the rest of my life." It looks like even after you get there, you're still going to be a constant work in progress, Rahul.
I think so, Venkat. So again, as I said, a lot of see when I talked about technical knowledge, right? Say for example, today's young finance professionals learn to write queries and SQLs, etc., which is probably now even in the academics, right? And we didn't learn. I know I don't know about you, but I don't know still how to write a query and learn that. So again, the relevance of whether as a CFO you need to write learn SQL may not be there, because obviously at this level you're not expected to do a lot of on the ground work or do it hands on. But I think your ability to do what with that query, your ability to take insights, and again the actionable insights, right? It's just not about data and then converting into insights. What do you do with those insights? What is that action that you need to take in this week and this quarter and this year for you to be able to make considerable progress in the business goal that you're set out for, right? So that whole strategic thinking, combined with a technical understanding of how that data or insights will be gathered and then converted into business actionable goals. I think that's really the journey that you have to be a master of, versus just the technical knowledge, right? At the same time, for example, if there are new accounting standards, you definitely need to be updated. You may not be have an expert level understanding, but I think a
Right.
general understanding of how it impacts your business, your P&L, that's very very important. And obviously then you will get the right people to work along with you, who may have that expertise level. But I don't think you also need to choose what you're really good at, right? And so accentuate your strengths. At the same time, areas which are of your weakness, have general understanding of it, right? So you cannot say
Right.
that I didn't like tax when I grew up, and today you need to handle whether it's GST or income tax, you need to handle them. So
Correct.
you still need to have a general understanding of how these things work. At the same time, you are not expected to have expertise in every aspect of the role itself. So
Got
identify
it.
your strengths and accentuate on them.
Got it. So Rahul, although you didn't answer this question directly, it looks like you did say that most of it is on-the-job training, but it looks like most of it is also self-driven. So there has got to be a lot of pull effect in terms of kind of seeking out learnings and absorbing them, rather than being dependent on the organization or your HR team or anybody else to make it happen for you.
So see, you need an enabling environment, right? But
Right.
it's not going to be given on a platter. So as I said, you need to raise your hand, right, at any given opportunity, right? So for example, if you are doing an X work and a Y project comes in, you need to understand that how does that Y project help you. And let me tell you that in today's day and age, there's just so much of work streams happening. There's so many cross-functional projects happening that if you are going to volunteer in one or two or three of them, your boss is going to love it, right? Because they need the additional bandwidth. And what it gives you is that additional one area of expertise or awareness that you was probably missing from your repertoire. So I think that whole learning, a lot of that has to be self-driven, because organizations, etc., may only be able to only provide you so much, right? I mean, they expect you to be able to deliver on your current work stream, but then that additional knowledge that you want to get by having that being part of those specific projects, etc., is also going to come a lot from your within, if you want that faster growth, right? Otherwise, obviously, there are time-based promotions, though in the private sector those are going to increasingly become lesser and lesser. I don't see
Yeah.
age is going to matter anymore. I
Exactly.
think what
Yeah.
is really going to matter is your attitude to perform and some of the experience that you've gained. That is going to really matter, right? So, I mean, that's the
Got it.
reality.
Got it.
Otherwise,
So somewhere the message here, Rahul, seems to be that look, grab the opportunity, proactively ask for more work, probably kind of pack in 20 years of learnings and experiences in 10 years of physical life, right? So that kind of automatically puts you ahead of your peers. If I can now go on to the next question, and you already alluded to a little bit of this, which is really got to do with the culture, right? So a lot of us could be, a lot of the young professionals here could be wondering that how do I know whether I'm in the right place? Right? Am I in an organization that fosters a culture of innovation, that encourages us to kind of take more responsibilities? So what are the markers? And if I can just broaden the definition of organization also to include the boss, right? Because ultimately, like for example, in my life, I think the first bosses that I had, I mean, to me, they are no lesser than my parents. The kind of opportunities they gave, they allowed me to make mistakes, but they never clipped my wings. They said, "Beta, aapko kaam karna hai, seekho." It
Right.
doesn't matter, right? Because that kind of a to have those kind of people to mentor you, to give you opportunity. They might not have given a promotion, but they gave an opportunity to get involved in areas that were probably not traditionally meant for you, right? But are there any markers that people can recognize, to say ki if these things are there in an organization, or if these traits are there in my boss, then I know that I am at the right place, which is going to help me fast track my growth?
Sure. So I think if you look at the larger organizational context, I think you definitely want to be in a company that has a larger vision, and is thinking big, right? It's there out there to play, playing to win versus just say playing to sustain, right? And because playing to sustain is only going to give you a certain rate of growth, and therefore, if the company or the organization is going to grow only at a certain, at a slower pace of growth, your overall number of opportunities that's going to be available in that company with the leadership roles that are going to be available in the company are going to be increasingly lesser and lesser, right? So one thing, if you are kind of early stage in the company, just look out for that sign that how large is the vision of the company, how well are they going about executing on that vision. Are they playing to win a market? Are they going to create new categories? I think within that, a subset will be obviously the innovation index within that company, because if if they are leaders in a category and they're not thinking about where does year 3 growth come from, then that's a warning signal, right? Because then you're not really investing sufficiently in the future growth prospects. So that's really the organization context. I think the enabling environment that I talked to you about is really the immediate, say your bosses, the peer network, the HR policies, for example. Like, do they encourage you to take cross-functional responsibilities or roles? Have those experiences. If you want to do a 2-year business role and come back to a finance role, I think those are really looked really well in today's day and age. I mean, gone are the days where you had a classical career, right? That you go on to start with X role and go to a regional finance, and then the taxation, treasury, corporate finance, and then you could potentially become a CFO. I think what today's day and age you require is a lot of those cross-functional understanding. So if you want to do a role outside your core function and the organization enables it, that's great again, because that can fast track your own learning journey and career and growth.
Fair enough. Okay. And anything about the type of bosses that you should be looking to work under, Rahul?
I think, you see, honestly, I believe you can't choose your boss, so don't bother too much about it. Right? Yes, there could be situations where, I'm going to talk, probably that's a minority where you really don't get along well because of extraneous reasons. But other than that, I don't think that really should matter. Yes, as I said, having an enabling boss will definitely, charge you up and, motivate you and fast track you. But I think do take responsibility of your own career, right? Nobody's going to come and give it to you on a platter. So irrespective of who is your current boss, I think you can definitely make those opportunities, make those choices that will help you in that longer journey.
Right. The one thing you've done, Rahul, is to take away an excuse, so people can't say I got a bad boss, therefore I couldn't become a CFO early, So you're almost saying that your destiny is in your own hands.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm also going to start picking up a few questions that we're getting from participants, right? So this is a question from Deepak Saini. Has got 3 questions. I'm going to ask one out of this, Deepak. Yeah, so this seems to be like, how do you align the micro and the macro, right? So the question is, how do you align your day-to-day tasks with your KRAs?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one, right? As I said, you need to have what I call watching the traffic. Right? You are really, when in larger roles, you start becoming a traffic controller or a traffic watcher, right? Less of a controller, right? You kind of need to know everything that's happening around, but also where you focus your day-to-day effort is really around the large leverage projects, right? Which necessarily needs maybe a certain amount of decision making. You want to be directly responsible for only a few of them, right? And obviously start building your teams that provides you the additional leverage. So take on a daily basis, I actually take a very few decisions myself. I mean, if you're taking more decisions, then you're not having the right structure, or there's just too much on your plate, and therefore you start missing out on the larger leverage items that are available that the organization may need you for. So I think that's a clear watch out for me, that if I'm taking too many decisions on my on daily basis, then that's definitely a place where I don't want to be, or the organization does not expect you to be.
Right. Thanks, Rahul. I just want to quickly check, Valentino, if you want to run the polls, do you want to run those two questions now?
Yes.
Okay. So why don't you go ahead and run both simultaneously?
Murtuza, can you?
Okay, so
Yeah.
so there are two polls that you can see in your chat window, friends. Yeah, I can also see it on the screen now. So, in your opinion, which of the following traits makes for a great CFO? Results-oriented mindset, big picture thinking, honesty and integrity, and strong leadership. So it looks like we can select only one, Murtuza, right? So please go ahead, friends, and make your choice. Right, it's quite interesting actually. It's about 80% think that it's about big picture thinking and results oriented mindset. Very low percentages for honesty and integrity, probably because it's maybe
It's a
considered
given.
as a given in
It's
this
a
role, right? So maybe that's the reason. Yeah, and do you want to run the second one as well? Is that still going on, or is the poll closed, Murtuza? Oh, it's still morphing actually. Yeah, you can see the results moving. Okay, so what are the top three criteria you look at while making a career move? Is it the organization brand that you're moving into? Is it the company's culture and values? Is it the compensation? Is it a better designation and role, or is it about the people that you're going to be working with? It looks like we can choose one, right? So again, overwhelmingly looks like it's about culture and values that should drive the decision to move into a new organization. Thank you, Murtuza. Thank you, Valentino. We'll kind of continue with the Q&A. So one other thing that I wanted to provide as an input to our participants is one of the very important points that Rahul made was about having a plan, right, a career plan. And one of the excellent initiatives that Aditi Nair, our Chief People Officer, ran within Practus is to help us put together a very structured personal and professional development plan, right? So all of us have one of these, and it's very helpful, to kind of start documenting what is it that you want to do in life, both personal and professional. What are your motivations? What's your last day statement? So let's say today is your last day in life, then how do you want to kind of document what you have achieved? So if any one of you is interested in that document, then obviously it'll be a blank template that you can fill up for yourself. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. I'm sure our HR will be more than happy to provide that to you, just as a practical takeaway from today, like a do-it-yourself exercise, if you like, to complete it. I'm hoping that it will be helpful for you in your professional journey as you go along. Right? We have one more question from Faiz for you, Rahul. Yeah, and okay, so a question from Faiz is, you mentioned that one should be able to understand the business to get to a senior management position. What suggestions would you like to make to people who are working with some international MNCs where business is remotely located?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's the adaptability point that I made, right? I mean, this is a new ways of working. Probably hybrid or remote first is going to be the future. I think here again, what you want to do probably is again depending on the company or the category. For example, if there is on the ground work happening, you may want to take those initiative and do some physical visit of those workplaces or those factory locations or marketplaces, and really start interacting with the cross-functional teams. I mean, a lot of the learning, etc. Because in your own mind, you may have a lot of questions around how do those how do those functions operate, what are their KPIs, what are their KRAs. So I think do a lot of learning through interacting with people. Yes, if obviously in the COVID period it may have been only digital, but as things start opening up, do make it a point to visit those physical workspaces or physical locations of folks, interact with these cross-functional teams, understand from them how do they run their business, ask the basic questions, the doubts that you have, and therefore try to soak in how they go towards their operating excellence in their respective functions.
Right. Thanks, Rahul. I think Faiz, maybe the thing that you could do is to probably talk to your company, right, to see if they are willing to get you to travel to wherever the company's business is. If not, I would strongly recommend it's okay to kind of travel at your own cost. Maybe if it's overseas, it's just a vacation. I mean, drop in to your head office, spend a couple of days there. The other aspect, right, is also about visiting your customers, your company's customers and your company's vendors, right? They are also very instructive. right? For example, at Unilever, it is absolutely mandatory. It doesn't matter which function you are in. You are expected to do a stint with, say, rural marketing, where you're actually kind of going to kirana shops and talking to the shopkeepers. It kind of gives you a real feel, of what the business is. Yeah, so it's not just your own company and meeting the other HODs, etc. It can also be about meeting other stakeholders, the larger ecosystem that your company works with. Yeah. I think there's one more question from Vikas, Rahul, where he's asking, after 15 years of experience, where should the focus be more on a daily basis? Is it on functional work or on business partnership?
I think it has to be a business partnership, right? It starts and ends there. I mean, unless there is a business where we are all aligning ourselves, there is no function to run, right? I mean, that's something which I strongly believe in. While you are obviously partnering with the business, you will realize that you are enhancing your own functional skills, because what you bring on the table, the reason that you have a seat on the table or that co-pilot role is because you are bringing in a different perspective to the same business problem, right? From the financial lens, or from the analytical lens, which others may not be able to bring in. So I think be closely wedded to some of these business roles and business partnerships, and try to enhance your functional skills while being delivering on the job through those tie-ups and those close relationships.
Got it. So if we can go on to the next question, Rahul, and I'm also conscious about the time. We probably have about 4 or 5 minutes. Um, so if you were to kind of rewind your career about 10 to 15 years, right? And if you had to make a choice of changing your job, and you have to make a decision on which industry you should be getting into, right? Like you took a call to join Swiggy like 5 or 6 years back. If you were to kind of do that, and as I said, maybe you are in your early 30s, are there any specific industries that you would like to provide some guidance on to our participants, saying that, okay, these are maybe the top 3 industries that you could focus on for accelerated growth in the next 3 to 5 years' time?
Yeah, that's a tough one, Venkat, because what you're really trying to ask me is to predict the future, which I think is close to impossible situation. But I mean, here's what I would say, right? I think for you to be able to be aware about what's really happening and make those informed choices yourself, you will need to do that amount of reading, that amount of interaction. So, for example, when I was in a global role, as I said, I had traveled, a lot of countries. I had met a lot of people. I understood, where global growth, etc., is going to stack up. And therefore, when I looked at that decision of, okay, should I come back to India? Should I join a consumer tech startup? Should I join the technology side of things? Uh, that's what I was taking a bet of the future. Right now, today, if you kind of look at again, what is the bet of the future? There are at least at least 8 or 10 themes which are emerging. Right now, which one of them will outgrow is something that is very difficult to call out, right? But I think what you definitely want to do is not be, kind of do enough research to not be part of an ecosystem where it is X growth, right? So that's something you should definitely avoid. At the same time, choose the ones which you have, after your own analysis and insights, after speaking to folks, you've been able to arrive at that probably short funnel. And again, here you see, you may want to join only that one particular startup which is in the highest growth setup, but you may not get that opportunity. So that's where not the road ends, right? Because as I said, life is all about creating those opportunities and then making choices, right? So you will have to therefore work on certain plan A, B, C, D, and going forward, when you want to look back at your career, you want to connect the dots around what got me here. Was it part of a plan? So one thing which I strongly suggest is always do this pro con list, right? Which is the pros and cons of whatever change or decision that you're taking in life, whether it is your personal growth or your professional change. That why do you think you are joining this particular category or this sector or this company? What made you take those decisions, right? What data points did you get? What insights did you drive? And what are the consequences of that? For example, what can go wrong, which means that after 3 or 4 years you may look back and say, okay, I made the wrong choice. If any, once you have made those kind of decision making framework in place, you just get to make better choices in the future, right? So it's absolutely fine to make mistakes. All of us make. I think the beauty in making mistakes is you should not repeat them, and what learning you've been able to apply there in the future is what will differentiate you. As I said in the past, increase your probability of success, and that can only come through a lot of funneling of those choices and taking a bet of the future.
Got it. So somewhere what you're saying is don't be so scared of failures that you stop experimenting, right? But be
Yeah.
careful not to make the same mistake again. See, somewhere I think the question that is being asked is about how do you kind of improve your level of judgment, right? Obviously, nobody has seen the future, but how do you improve your level of judgment that you minimize the chances of failure and maximize the chances of success? But the problem is, you get better at it only when you start taking those decisions. You win some, you lose some, but as we keep going along, right, you just keep getting better at making those correct decisions, I guess. Yeah. But Rahul, small request, can we take another 5 minutes? I mean, there are a couple of other questions that I wanted to quickly cover. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, Venkat.
Yeah,
We can go ahead.
fine. So I think we'll keep this very brief, friends. I know there are several other questions, but I'm going to take two, right? So one question from Vinod Shah is, Rahul, in case you're going to take an interview for a CFO role, let's say in your subsidiary company, then what is the expectation from the candidate and how would you select the candidate?
Yeah. I think the first and foremost thing, obviously that I look for is the attitude, right? And I'm kind of already discounting the fact that they have the right, say background, educational qualification, etc. And when finally the candidate does come, what is the attitude to not only life but to their work, and some of these experiences that they've had, how have they delivered the results? It's just not what they have delivered; it's also how they have delivered the results. So I think that is very very important, right? Because over time, if you're going to hire for senior folks, you're not looking at the smartest or the highest individual contributor. What you're looking for is teamwork, and within a set of team, how have they been able to deliver on those outcomes and goals without obviously taking a lot of just the individual contribution in the picture. So that to me is the foremost thing which I look for is the attitude and the how of those results versus just the what of it.
Correct. And friends, this has got to be the absolute last question. This one is from Ajay. How do you get time to balance your professional and personal time? Although at leadership level, these two seem to be mostly merged.
Yeah, I mean, see, I think work from home definitely has helped us, to make those choices even more balanced today. I think there's always and definitely more time to be investing in yourself. I do this. I think just having those early starts in the day where you kind of take a couple of hours to do your reading and do your physical activities, etc. Just charges you up for the day ahead. So I think again these are choices that you have to make, whether you need that extra hour of sleep at the at the age profile that you are operating in, versus doing that additional one activity. Maybe it's the physical activity, maybe it's about reading, maybe it's about current affairs. What really sets you up for success, not only in your personal life but also in your professional life, right? So I think there's has to be a holistic approach, of development. There is just not, as they would say, in academics, right, in the school context, you just don't want to be the first rank student. You also want to develop a few other skills, and the extracurricular activities that you do. You may not be the best in everything, but you definitely want to experience a lot of them for that holistic development. I strongly believe in that too.
Got it. This has been a super session, Rahul. I think for me, I've made several notes along this session, extremely instructive, and obviously, we'll try and document this and put it out on social media, etc. I'm sure that Murtuza, Madhuri, and team will also be sharing a recording of this as we go along. So, to me, Rahul, the key takeaways were when we talked about the skills, right? What you really said is the ambition to kind of get to become a top-notch CFO, to have a plan very early on in your career and start working hard towards that plan. The second was really about collecting as many experiences as possible. Don't be scared to go outside your comfort zone. Don't be scared to go outside the finance and accounts function. Maximize your learnings on the business side. Figure out how your company is making money. Meet more people. You also talked about your judgment within finance. It dramatically improves when you are able to get learnings from other aspects of the business. So, make sure that you're spending time on other business functions. You also talked about the importance of execution. So, for a good CFO, it's not just essential to be the ideas guy, but you also need to be able to execute those plans really well. Uh, Among the traits that a CFO needs to have, you talked about the ability to communicate and articulate. You emphasize the importance of networking, not only within your own finance community, but also people from different walks of life. You gave the Charles Darwin example of adaptability, and you also talked about people management. And in a subsequent comment you mentioned that it's not so important to be an individual contributor or a superstar, but you need to be somebody who knows how to leave decision making to others. So you're really kind of seeing your role more as a conductor of an orchestra, rather than being the chief vocalist or the chief musician in the program. uh, you also talked about some of the traits of the organization that you should be working with, and you looked at what is the vision of the organization. I think in the poll as well, culture and values of the organization kind of came out as a top choice of our participants. And you also brought up an interesting concept of an innovation index to see whether it's a kind of company that is not scared to give young professionals who are ambitious the opportunity to try out and possibly fail in some of the initiatives that they are taking. I think most importantly for me, the message was that look, your destiny is in your hands. Right, you've got to maximize your learnings. You've got to create opportunities for yourselves. As you keep getting into more and more opportunities, you will find that doors will begin to open that probably you're not aware of today, or they look to be closed today. But as you go along in your career, if you get the process right, then I think outcomes will start to open themselves up to you as you go along, right? So raise your hand. I think that was a clarion message from Rahul today, that raise your hand, put up a hand and say ki boss mujhe ye kaam karna hai. I think that seems to be, to me, the key takeaway. Raise your hand is really the message that I am taking away from this session, Rahul. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any closing comments, Rahul, we would love to hear them.
No, no, thank you, Venkat. I think you have summarized it really well. There are obviously aspects about this. I think ultimately what you want to do as a leader, right? I mean, CFO is a leadership position. What you really want to do is empower, leaders beneath you, and not really, take. I would say, as a leader, what you need to take is less credit from what you deserve and take more of the blame than what you deserve, right? So I think that's where leadership is all about. It's about really incubating leaders beneath within your function and within your organization.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rahul. Amrita sir, do you want to go to the last slide just in case any of the participants are interested to get in touch with us, either for a recording or any other inputs? Yeah, and Rahul, thank you once again very much. It's been a pleasure having you. I think what I really liked about this session was a very from the heart conversation. This wasn't a prepared presentation, right? It was more a dialogue. And thank you for sharing so generously from your personal journey and your life experiences. I'm sure that we will love to have you again. I'm hoping that you'll be able to again graciously spare the time to join us on some of our future events, Rahul. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Venkat. My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.